Hey everybody, new Game of Thrones. I've been getting a lot of requests for a Night King video, like what is he capable of, what is he doing on the show, how is he different from the books. So this will be a video sort of differentiating the way the TV show's using him, powers and abilities, as well as what's going on with him in the books, because obviously they're very different, and they're a little more mysterious about the way they're using him on the TV show. But what'll happen later tonight is I'll post my episode 6 video, and there's some really good news about Game of Thrones Season 8 that I'll talk about at the end of this. There's a lot of crazy stuff that's been happening lately, but there might actually be some genuine good news. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get everything. But just to start with the Night King of the TV show, from what we've seen so far, he's sort of like this ethereal bad guy that sort of gives off this atmospheric bad. We've never heard him speak, even though we know that the others, as they're called in the books, have a language that's called Scroth. It sounds like ice cracking. But since that big reveal in Season 4 about how the Night King created new White Walkers from Craster's sons, he's sort of been marching them around in circles, picking up people as they go along, stopping briefly for episodes like Hardhome to grab a whole bunch of people at once. We know that Dan and Dave met with George R. R. Martin a couple years ago to sort of get a roadmap for the series. Even though in later seasons they've had to diverge a lot from the books, they got a lot of big explainers from him. So in Season 6, when we saw the Children of the Forest create the Night King, that is a book plot point. It's just that the books are going to treat it a slightly different way. George R. R. Martin's always like, aha, wait till you see how I handle all of these things. So while he might not have all of the exact same powers of Greensight that they do and power over nature, he has most of the same abilities. Power over nature, power to bring the winter with him is just one of those big things that we've seen on the TV show so far. So I always get a lot of questions about what does he want, what is his ultimate goal, and it sounds like it's mostly just wiping the board clean. He's sort of like this mindless person, and it remains to be seen whether or not the show will ever turn him into an actual character, because right now he's sort of like a prop that they just wheel out. He doesn't have any dialogue. You don't really know anything about his motivation other than he just wants to kill everybody. We can start spinning theories after the finale, but I think that this has caused them to change their plans for Season 8 just a little bit in the way they treat the White Walkers as a villain on the show in favor of more human villains like Cersei, for instance. So Cersei gets a big book upgrade just because they painted themselves into a bit of a corner with the White Walkers as they've presented them so far. So don't feel bad if you're a little bit confused about why they used him to market Season 7 so much. His face was like the face of the first big poster they released, like, holy shit, he's coming. But you don't see him that much, and there's a whole bunch of twists that don't totally make sense. So at least on the TV show, it feels like there's a big question mark in front of his face when it comes to what his powers are, what his story is going to be. It's a little more spelled out in the books. I know a lot of you are wondering about the theory that he might be a version of Bran, like all of the Bran's theory. I talked a little bit about that earlier this season. I think it's taking Bran's powers a little too far, but I certainly believe that it's possible that he was a Stark of Winterfell. It's just that when old Nan is telling her tales back during the first book, she suggests to Bran, as she's telling this story, whose name is Brandon, that the mythical Night's King, the one that was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, was a brother of the King of Winter, the Stark King in Winterfell at the time, and his name was Brandon. So I think, one, she's trying to freak him out and tell a really good story, but I do think that there's an element of truth to that. Just like a lot of the prophecies, like you hear Melisandre talk about how prophecy can be a tricky thing, there's elements of truth in there, but it's not meant to be literal truth. So a lot of people picked up on that and just thought, well, you know, if Nan is saying that his name was Brandon, then maybe Bran using his Greenside powers going into the past had something to do with his creation as well. But I don't think the TV show Night King is our Bran. I think the TV show is doing a Cliff's Notes version of the Night King. And when George R. R. Martin explains what old Nan was talking about, the Night's King, is that the person on the TV show? Everyone was asking that after we learned about him in Season 6. Martin clarified that that person that old Nan was talking about is no more alive today than any of the other mythic people from the Age of Heroes from thousands of years ago. So he definitely existed because we know the Long Night happened, so there was a Night's King at that time. But it makes it sound like Cycle of Ice and Fire. You can kill the Night's King, but you can also create another one. So at least in the books, it sounds like what happened is that after the last one was killed, another one was raised up and then started creating more White Walkers, because Craster's sons being turned into White Walkers is a very big thing in the books too. We've seen several White Walkers get killed off on the TV show, but how many sons did Craster have? And we have to imagine that there are probably other people in the North that are doing that too, that have that pact with the White Walkers. We'll leave you alone as long as you sacrifice us your male sons so that we can create more White Walkers. The whole Bran's secret identity thing, I think, just has risen up from the idea of secret Targaryens. There's that funny saying that you're not really a character on Game of Thrones until you might secretly be someone else. And George R. Martin is just really fond of using the same name over and over. So like Aegon the Conqueror was such a famous person that there were probably a lot of Targaryens who named their sons Aegon, especially in the extended family. So it's the same thing with Brandon and the Stark family. It's just a very common name, so it gets used over and over. But that doesn't mean that our Bran is somehow all of those Brans. But I do think it's a really fun idea, and I am holding out hope that Bran is sort of like the opposite of the Night King, because his powers flow from green sight, the same powers of the Children of the Forest, so does the Night King. So at some point, those two forces are going to have to clash directly. But we can talk more about that after episode 6, because I think there's still a couple big twists to happen this season. But it is safe to say that the Knights Kings of the book, the multiple ones, however many there have been, have the same powers as the ones that we've seen on the TV show. Just in the way that the TV show is jumping forward so fast, I'm not expecting to get too many supernatural explainers, so I think that's actually a good thing, because one, that just lets us have a little bit more fun with the fandom, like just kind of picking over it and trying to figure it out ourselves, but two, it also leaves the door open for George R. R. Martin to do something slightly different with it in the future books. But we can glean that he has powers of mass resurrection, so while a single White Walker can raise people one at a time from the dead, the Night King can do an entire army all at the same time. I think it's mostly just a proximity situation, like all these people along the beach at Hardhome here. He was able to raise them all up, so we can say he has at least a quarter-mile radius for his powers of raising people from the dead. But I think it's a sliding scale of difficulty. We've only seen him raise humans before, so I don't think that he could just walk south of the wall and go into like a zoo and just raise everything from a quarter-mile away. I think just like Bran has an easier time controlling small animals than controlling people like Hodor with really powerful minds, it's the same thing for the Night King. The more powerful the mind, the closer you have to be and the more focused you have to be. We've seen him create ice weapons. There's that ice blade that he's been carrying around for the past couple of seasons. We know that he has the same psychic green sight that Bran has because he sort of grabs him here. So we know that he does have a mind of his own. He has intelligence. He has thoughts. It's just that we don't know what they are. So I do sympathize with you if you're really upset that they haven't explored his character more fully, but I think they've just done that on the TV show in favor of the more human characters. Like they really want Cersei to be this really big villain. And it really seems like they're using the Night King as more of a MacGuffin, like, oh, we got this thing off in the distance here, it's coming, it's going to be really dangerous, but really most of the action that they've dedicated themselves to is the human drama, like the back and forth of the characters, like what's going on with Cersei and King's Landing, what is she going to do to throw things off the rails, what's going on between Jon and Daenerys with them coming together, what's going on in Winterfell. There's a whole bunch of things that we'll have to talk about after episode 6, because a lot of people wondering, is Ghost going to come back? So the TV show is just making a lot of moves before season 8. So the good news, actually, I'll say now, the good news about season 8 is that they start shooting in October, which if you didn't know was around the time that they started shooting last year. So earlier this year, I did a video about season 8 about how they basically said that we might not get this till 2019. So everybody's shaking their fists like you'd expect. I mean, of course, it'd be disappointing to go a whole year without Game of Thrones. We waited so long for season 7. But then a little while after the season started, it was reported by HBO themselves that all of the season 8 scripts, all 6 of them, had been submitted, they're finished, and they were just figuring out how they were going to film the season, and that was the potential big source of the delay. But then Nikolai Coster-Waldau recently just said that he was going back to Belfast to start filming season 8 in October, meaning that they have their start date. So even if it still takes them about 6 months to film the season, which is a normal shooting schedule for Game of Thrones, in a couple more months of posts after that, there's a chance we can still get those season 8 episodes by the summer, which I think is a best case scenario, because they've also said that they're going to wait till the year after season 8 to premiere whatever the prequel series is going to be. They still haven't revealed that. They just said that it's a very recognizable past event. So let me know in the comments, what do you think of the TV show's treatment of the Night King, and what do you think they're going to do with him in season 8? because it sounds like they might defeat him relatively quickly, and then Dream of Spring, Lord of the Rings style, the last couple of episodes will just be everybody trying to rebuild. You'll actually see some of that play out. But what'll happen is I'll post my episode 6 video tonight after the episode airs. We'll talk about all the big crazy twists. There is a new round of that HBO Now giveaway. All you have to do to enter, just be a subscriber, leave a comment on this video. So while you wait for everything, you can click here for my episode 6 video. I'll update the link when I post that video, and you can click here to learn all about Jon Snow's father. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.